it's the lawlessness that people object to. The lawlessness of the illegal immigrants. They broke our laws. If there's a consequence for that, they should have expected that. And even if they're kids that grew up here, were raised here, they got an education, even if they have to go back to another country, they already have a step up. They have a U.S. education and can speak English. So there's an advantage. So I don't view everyone as a victim, is what I'm saying. However, the greatest lawlessness is by our government, and especially this administration, which is just exasperating the problems because they don't respect the law. And how are we supposed to respect the immigrants, legal or illegal? And then the last thing is I've worked with immigrants from Africa mostly. I've been to Nairobi, seen the processing center there. And these are refugees coming from just horrible areas. And so I am a proponent for accepting refugees. Some of the people I've met from places like Sudan, etc., I mean, they're the biggest patriots you'll ever want to know. So I believe in that, but this government that we have right now will not look at genocide in the Middle East and prioritize Christians. In fact, I think they've gone out of their way to decrease the number of Christians we're going to accept from Syria, etc. And it's just appalling, and it's the lawlessness that really angers people.
I understand that frustration because we are a nation of laws. But not all laws are created equal, and we have some bad laws on the book. I don't know how many people in this room want to see Obamacare enforced to every, jot and tittle on the book. We're not out there saying, boy, that's in Obamacare, so we got to go out there and make sure that one's enforced. No, we want to change that. We want to get rid of it. We want to, in fact, revoke it altogether and start anew. And the problem is we do have an absolutely broken legal immigration system. It doesn't serve our needs. 6% of our workforce is made up of people who are here illegally. And they are not stealing jobs from people. They're taking, as I said, they're taking jobs that other people don't seem to want. They've tried. Alabama passed a draconian law that got rid of a lot of the illegal immigrants who were living in Alabama. And what happened? The crops started to rot. Cities and towns that were dependent on, illegal immigrants coming in and buying their groceries and buying their pickups and buying their, renting their houses, etc., found that, suddenly all that dried up. So I don't think it's in our interest. There is a concept, and I'll probably mispronounce this because it's a concept I mostly read and don't ever say. I think it's called desuetude. It's D-E-S-U-E-T-U-D-E. Those lawyers out here, anybody in the room who's a lawyer probably knows that concept, which is basically that if a law is unenforced long enough and is ignored long enough, it becomes unenforceable. And that's what you have now in our current immigration law. It's based on our saying to every single person in this room who's ever hired anybody to cut their lawn or babysit their kids, you are an adjunct of the Immigration Service and you must check everybody's papers and you have to keep them on file for 3 years and we're going to fine you. It's not a law that's enforceable. It was a very badly written law in 1986 and that's why it didn't fix the problem. We need to fix the problem.
To that point, though, I would add, we can't selectively choose which laws we're going to obey and which ones we're not going to obey, otherwise we have anarchy. So we have to be careful with that one. With regards to the workers, that is a big myth, and I agree with Linda. If immigrants really took jobs away from large numbers of American workers, especially during the hard economic times, then one would expect to find high unemployment rates in those parts of the country with large numbers of immigrants. So it's not a zero-sum game. The jobs that they're taking are not jobs that Americans are normally filling. Plus, in addition to that, a lot of the immigrants do create jobs by starting businesses and hiring people. So we have to take the whole picture into consideration.
This is going to be an unusual question, and I'll explain to you why I'm asking it in a moment. For the three of you, actually the four of you, do you believe coming to this country as an immigrant or a refugee is a right or privilege? We'll start with Jeff.
It's a privilege.
It's a privilege.
It's a privilege.
Privilege.
The reason why I asked that is I'm uniquely qualified, I guess, to discuss the subject. I am a retired immigration and customs enforcement agent for 27 plus years on the job. I have suffered the frustrations that many people in this room have suffered from both sides of the political line. This is not a partisan political issue. The laws on the books, as they were written in 1952, and then amended again in 1986, and then again in 1996, and then again in 2000, we have a love-hate relationship, or what I call a schizophrenic approach to immigration. We have to find a way in which to balance this out so that our labor force is here in the United States is protected by our immigration laws, and at the same time renew our labor force with fresh blood. The bottom line is that I believe the laws on the books, for the most part, with some tweaking, are well written, and the people who work in the field and work on the ground want to enforce those laws humanely, which is what I did. And the phrase Operation Wetback offends me just as much as it would anybody else. My grandparents came from Greece. You're right, we are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws, and I think we have to find that balance. That's all I've got to say.
My question is in regards to in-state tuition. So should there not be a penalty for illegal alien students who are attending a public university in regards to tuition? I came from a different state before I transferred to Colorado Christian, and I had to pay out-of-state tuition. And yet I was still working and paying taxes, and I still had to pay out-of-state tuition. So shouldn't there be some sort of penalty for those who come from a different country, not just another state?
Well, I guess from my point of view, it depends on when they came here. And it also depends, and I said I'm not 100% certain what the law is in Colorado in terms of where the money comes that's appropriated for the universities, whether it does come from property taxes, sales taxes, and what portion of it comes from income taxes. But if you've attended American schools, even though you may have been brought, like Armando was brought, as a youngster, and your parents have been working and paying taxes, then, and you've lived in this state that whole time, then you're no different from my child or grandchild who lives in this state. So it is different. Now, we can all argue about whether it's fair to charge so much to people out of state that we don't have a system where we have universal access to all schools across borders. But in terms of whether or not they've actually paid into the system and therefore have a right, the fact that they were born somewhere else, in terms of balancing that cost, should be determined on how long they've been here. Have their parents been paying taxes? And if they have, then I don't have a problem with it.
Great. My final question goes to Hugo. You said that you were not in favor of mass deportation. What is your position on the penalty for illegal aliens? Certainly they are breaking the law by being here illegally. And at what point does the statute of limitations on that run out?
I'm not sure about the statute. I'm not sure there is a statute.
There is.
Is there?
There is?
There is.
It's called cancellation of removal. And what happens is you have to be in removal proceedings. You have to have been residing in the United States for a continuous period of 10 years. You have to be an individual of good moral character. And you can't be convicted of any disqualifying crimes.
Well, that's good to know.
And there's
Read the book.
there's a quota on that. There's a
Oh,
ceiling.
okay.
Okay. Well,
That's
with
very
regards
helpful.
to the deportation question, the ones that I would move to deport immediately are the criminals. We need to identify those, deport them, and like I said, have some sort of law that would bar them from re-entry without a major penalty, such as a long prison sentence.
There is one already on the books. It's 8 U.S.C. 1326.
And in fact, they are a major portion of the people who are deported every year.
But is it enforced?
It
No,
was
it
when
does.
I was
Oh, yeah.
working,
No,
I had
it
a
is.
7-person
It is
squad, that's all we did for
That's not the
20 bucks.
information I received, but anyway, that's good to know. If there is one on the books, then that's another item that we need to demand that it be enforced vigorously, because there is a revolving door. I read about all these crime gangs that come from Central America, South America, and other places, and they just repopulate within a 3 to 6 month period. I can probably find 10 people that I know that are in the criminal justice system that were deported, re-entered, committed heinous crimes, and, you know, it's just a revolving door, so that has to be solved. Mass deportation is not practical, that's why I'm against it. And it would be economically devastating to the country, that's the other part that people don't like to talk about, so.
Actually, there was a study done, it's something like $1.6 trillion that it would cost the economy to deport that many people, and it would have we'd have I think a drop in gross domestic product of about 4%. So that's a recession, folks. So, you know, that's not a good thing.
A few more questions?
Well, a statement and a question. If we wanted to really work this deportation, we just need to stop eating salads.
There we go. And stop building houses and have dirty toilets and office buildings and among other
Stop
things.
eating chicken.
And no chicken, or pork, or beef.
I'm an elementary school teacher for 38 years. I'd like you to picture a 2nd grade classroom in Southern California, 24 kids, 8 different languages. We need over 20 different interpreters because we want to contact parents to see if they can help the kids with their schoolwork. The only thing they can help with is math. So picture parent-teachers conferences. The teacher's room is full of interpreters. It has made education so incredibly expensive. And I think you had the right answer. If we made it mandatory that they needed to learn English to come into the country, they would do it. To get into this wonderful, fantastic country, they would learn English to come here. And we can solve a lot of problems with that. And then you think of the police and the fire department. You have an emergency in one of these communities, they can't speak English. They end up in a hospital, they can't tell you what the problem is. They need to know English.
When I came here, there was no multi-language interpreters or anything. I got thrown into a classroom and I just had to learn. And my mother and father both spoke English at the times before coming here, so they helped me some. But just as a kid, you're out there playing with other kids and you learn the language. And believe me, my first phrase was, "What's your name?" And I would go around repeating that everywhere until I got beat up for being annoying.
And by the way, when your grandfather was coming here from Greece, he went, you know, we had a similar situation. We had multiple language. I mean, in the Lower East Side, you know, you had Yiddish-speaking Jews, you had Greeks, you had Italians, you had Poles, you had all these different people. And you didn't have teachers or interpreters or anything. They came into a classroom and they learned English. Now, it kept them back a little bit. It took them about a year longer to graduate, but they learned.
When my father started school, he did not speak a word of English. He learned English, and he learned it so well that you could not tell he was a high school graduate of college.
And by the way, over 97% of second generation Hispanic, in other words, their parents were immigrants, are English speaking. There are a very small percentage who are not English speaking. Most of these are old people who, you know, came a long time ago before they had a lot of education. But you know, we are learning English. Hispanic immigrants are learning English not just as fast as previous groups. They're actually demonstrably learning it faster, and that's largely because of, you know, the media and people wanting to be able to watch TV.
Okay, we have 3 more questions. We're just about out of time, so let's go pretty quick.
Don't worry. First off, I'd like to thank you guys for coming. You're really, you're really representing a view that is somewhat unrepresented in our circle, so thank you so much. But I'd like to go back to the topic, we kind of touched on this before, of the irony that you pointed out when you have these people who descended from immigrants who aren't accepting of new immigrants. What would be, I guess, the ideal way of dealing with that? Like, how do you educate? I think you before said that we have a lack of education. So how do we educate people to go back to their roots and realize that most of us are all immigrants, and that we need to be more accepting of that?
Well, you can support my Becoming American Institute. That's one way you can do it. I spend a whole lot of time going out and speaking to groups, talking about the history of immigration in this country. We have a very romantic vision. Everybody said, well, my grandfather came and he came here legally. They don't seem to recognize that at the time their grandfather came, there were no laws restricting immigration. You got on a boat, if you could pay the fare, and you landed and you didn't have TB or some other, a very visible communicable disease, you were in. So one of the things is just to go out there and to speak about this and to think about it, and to recognize that we love immigrants, but we tend to love the ones who came in our grandparents' generations, not like the people who are coming at any given time. And that doesn't matter whether we're talking about America in the 1850s, in 1910, or in 2016.
Jen?
Hi, so I'm actually a criminal defense attorney here in Colorado and also practice constitutional law. So first of all, I want to say, Ms. Chavez, thank you very much for your comments. And as a brief comment, I'm a conservative Christian and also a criminal defense attorney. Those are not mutually exclusive by any means. So I agree with your comment on the driver's license issue. And for me personally, a lot of my clients end up in the criminal justice system specifically just because they are targeted for not having a driver's license. They end up ultimately in the state of Colorado with habitual traffic strikes and then driving after revocation prohibited, which ends up getting them felonies that are accumulated. They don't have crimes of violence, they're not committing that. So I think that a distinction needs to be drawn between their illegality here versus being law-abiding citizens having the necessity of a driver's license. But my question mainly to Ms. Chavez is on criminal justice reform in the Immigration and Nationality Act for deferred sentences particularly. Is there any move on the Hill to reform the idea that if a criminal pleads on the record, and even if they're given the benefit of a deferred sentence, that still counts for collateral immigration consequences for deportation? I've had many clients who weren't even asked whether or not they were here legally, and so then they don't find out until after they've already accepted a plea. They think they're getting the benefit of probation, they think they're getting a deferred sentence, and then ultimately they're deported. And one of my clients was here since he was 3. He had no idea, it wasn't his fault, but then because of the United States Code, the judges lose jurisdiction, and then they say, too bad for you, we're going to deport you. Is there any movement for any reform on that issue?
Unfortunately, there's not a lot going on that issue, and I'm very familiar with it. I know of a case here in Colorado of a young woman, again, child, who was brought here as an infant or 2 or 3 years old, got in with the wrong crowd, was someplace with someone who was smoking marijuana. I don't think this kid was actually even smoking. Ends up getting arrested. This was before it was legal. He's now been deported already. He goes back to a village in Mexico. He didn't know. He didn't even speak Spanish very well. And he's stuck. And because of the circumstances of it, he's not eligible ever to come back unless we do some changing in that law. So there are a lot of things out there that need to be fixed. And unfortunately, because of the climate, we can't deal with these things. And I'm hopeful that after the election, after things simmer down, after people, frankly, if the economy ever heated up and we actually started producing jobs again, this whole issue would disappear. It's not a major issue in voting to people. It's always at the bottom of the list when they, list what do you care about. But the economy has to improve before the anxiety about this issue dies down.
So for someone like me, what do you think is the best way to advocate for these issues and promote that type of reform?
I think write your congressman, talk, and you can talk to me afterwards, because I do spend a lot of time on the Hill, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Thank you.
Last question.
Yeah, I'm a legal alien, I came here 10 years ago, and I even now know that even nowadays, if you come from the UK, it's a tough place to get into. And I absolutely agree, I think it's right. And very briefly, 10 years ago, it took me 2 years to get a green card. I had an interview at the American Embassy, I had a medical at the American Embassy, and I was told before my medical, if there was any illegal drug found in me, I would not be allowed into the States. In between the 10 years, a few friends have wanted to come to the States, and since 9/11, it is twice as hard from the UK to get into the States, and I entirely agree with this system. I wish in the UK we would have the strict procedures as we do here. Why does this not apply to other countries? When I say the UK, I'm talking Europe as well, but I only have the experience of the UK. But it's very, very tough to get into this country, and believe me, I entirely agree. I have to pay for everything, and don't please feel sorry for me, because before I came, I knew. And you're right, you're running the country, so why can't it apply to everywhere else?
Well, it does. I mean, if you're coming from, the UK, actually, you have a lot better chance. It only took you 2 years. If you're a PhD coming from the Philippines, it's going to take you 15 years. And as I said, if you're a PhD or an engineer or something coming from Mexico, it's going to take you 13 years. And depending on how old you are, by the time you get here, you're going to be actually closer to being able to draw on Social Security. You may not actually be giving your best years to being here. So the system doesn't work perfectly. Yes, it should be. We should have stringent requirements for getting into the United States. It is a privilege. It's not a right. It's a privilege. But those who come ought to be people that we need, and we do need people. I see a lot of gray hairs out here, and by the way, my hair's gray too. It's just Madam Clairol has covered it up for me. So, it's if our Social Security system will go bankrupt if we do not have more people of working age coming in, and Americans are not having babies anymore. The only people having babies are the immigrants who are coming in. They are actually producing. It's not just immigrants themselves, but their second generation. They have on average more children than the native born do, and I think growing is wonderful, and it's what leads to a great economy.
Well, I want to thank our panelists. Please join me in thanking them.